Captain Reed stood at the bridge of the exploration vessel Seeker, his gray-skinned hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the main screen. At 4 feet tall, he was considered quite impressive among his people, but something about today's discovery made him feel smaller than usual. "Captain, the signals are getting stronger," Officer Green reported from his station, his large eyes fixed on the dancing patterns across his screen. "They're definitely artificial, and they match no known patterns in our database." The bridge fell silent. In 50 years of space exploration, the Seeker's crew had never encountered unknown radio signals. Their part of the galaxy was well mapped, or so they had thought. "Show me the source," Reed ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. The main screen shifted to display a beautiful yellow star, much like the ones that hosted most intelligent life in the galaxy. But it was the second planet that caught everyone's attention. A massive world that shouldn't have been there. "That's impossible," Dr. Smith whispered from her science station. "Our star charts show nothing in this sector. How did we miss a planet twice the size of standard life-bearing worlds?" Reed walked closer to the screen, his footsteps echoing in the quiet bridge. The planet was beautiful, swirls of blue and green under white clouds, much like many life-bearing worlds. But its size was all wrong. Their sensors showed it had 1.3 times the gravity of standard habitable planets. "Any signs of civilization?" Reed asked, though he already knew the answer. The radio signals were proof enough. "Yes, sir," Green replied, his fingers dancing across his control panel. "We're picking up artificial structures on the surface. And..." He paused, double-checking his readings. "Sir, we're detecting power signatures. Big ones." Reed nodded slowly. First contact protocols were clear. Observe first. Reveal themselves second. "Take us into orbit," he ordered. "Stealth systems at maximum." The Seeker glided silently through space, its advanced cloaking technology making it invisible to any watching eyes below. As they entered orbit, the sensor data became clearer, and with it came more surprises. "Captain," Dr. Smith called out, her voice shaking slightly. "The atmospheric readings, they're off the charts. The oxygen levels are much higher than standard habitable worlds." "Survivable for us?" Reed asked, already thinking about sending down a scout team. "Yes, but..." Smith paused, rechecking her data. "Sir, something's not right. The biological readings we're getting. The size calculations must be wrong." Reed walked to her station, looking over her shoulder at the readings. His eyes widened. "Run it again," he ordered quietly. Smith ran the scan 3 more times. The results didn't change. "Prepare the scout ship," Reed announced to the bridge crew. "We need visual confirmation of these readings. Dr. Smith, Officer Green, you're with me. And someone wake up Dr. Black. Our anthropologist is going to want to see this." As the crew prepared for their descent, Reed stood in the scout ship's bay, looking at his small team. None of them knew it yet, but they were about to make history. The readings suggested something unprecedented, something that would change their understanding of life in the galaxy forever. "Remember," he told his team as they boarded the small craft, "we observe only. No contact, no signals, nothing that could give away our presence. Whatever's down there." He paused, looking at each of his crew members. "Whatever's down there is unlike anything we've ever encountered." The scout ship detached from the Seeker, its stealth systems engaged as it began its descent through the atmosphere. As they broke through the cloud cover, none of them were prepared for what they would find. A civilization built on a scale that would shake the foundations of their understanding of the possible. Little did Captain Reed know, this was just the beginning of a discovery that would change not just his life, but the entire galaxy's perception of what humans were capable of. The scout ship broke through the thick white clouds, and everyone on board gasped. Below them stretched a city unlike anything they had ever seen. The buildings weren't just big, they were enormous. Even the smallest structures would have dwarfed the tallest buildings on the aliens' homeworld. "This can't be right," Officer Green whispered, his large eyes growing even wider. He adjusted their sensors again, trying to make sense of the readings. Captain, according to our instruments, those residential buildings are at least 50 stories tall. Dr. Smith stood frozen at her station, her gray fingers trembling as she worked her controls. The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever civilization built this, they're far more advanced than we thought possible for an unknown world. Captain Reed guided their cloaked ship lower, staying well above the tallest structures, but close enough to see details. The morning sun reflected off buildings made of steel and glass, creating a dazzling display. Wide streets stretched between the massive structures, and vehicles moved along them in orderly lines. There, Dr. Black pointed at something moving on one of the wider streets. "Can we get closer?" Reed carefully moved their ship nearer, maintaining their stealth field. What they saw next made them all fall silent. Walking along the street was a being that looked exactly like a human, except it was massive. The creature had to be at least 12 feet tall, dressed in what appeared to be normal clothing, carrying what looked like a small bag that would have been the size of the alien shuttlecraft. "Impossible," Dr. Smith breathed, checking and rechecking her instruments. "The biological readings, they're human. But humans aren't supposed to be this big. The ones we've encountered on Earth are barely taller than us." They watched as more of the giant humans appeared, going about their morning routines. They walked in and out of the huge buildings, rode in vehicles that could have housed entire alien families, and gathered in parks where the trees stretched hundreds of feet into the sky. "Look at their movements," Dr. Black observed, his anthropologist's training kicking in. Despite their size, they're perfectly adapted to this environment. The higher gravity doesn't seem to affect them at all. If anything, they appear to be thriving. Reed moved their ship to observe a construction site. Giant humans in yellow safety gear were operating machinery that made the aliens' largest construction equipment look like toys. They lifted massive steel beams with ease, their enhanced strength evident in every movement. "Sir," Green called out suddenly, his voice tense, "I'm picking up some sort of scanning beam. I don't think they've detected us, but their technology, it's incredibly advanced." Reed immediately pulled their ship higher, not willing to risk detection. "What kind of scanning technology?" "It's like nothing we've seen before," Green replied, studying his readings. "They're not just scanning for physical objects. They're scanning dimensional variances. If we stay too long, they might detect our stealth field." "Take us back up," Reed ordered, his mind racing with the implications of what they'd seen. "We need to report this to the Federation immediately." As their ship climbed back through the atmosphere, the crew remained silent, each lost in their own thoughts about what they'd witnessed. These weren't just humans. They were humans who had adapted to become giants, who had built a civilization to match their scale, who had developed technology that might rival or exceed their own. "Sir," Dr. Black finally spoke as they approached the Seeker, "the Federation isn't going to believe this. Humans are considered a newly spacefaring race. But this suggests they've had colonies for hundreds of years that we never knew about. Colonies that have evolved into something extraordinary." Reed looked back at the planet growing smaller behind them. "They'll believe it when they see our evidence, and they'll have to believe it when we make contact." He paused, watching the massive world fade into the distance. "Because make no mistake, we will have to make contact. A civilization like this can't be ignored." The scout ship docked with the Seeker, but none of the crew could shake the feeling that they had just witnessed something that would change the galaxy forever. Back aboard the Seeker, the crew gathered in the main observation room to study their recordings. The giant humans had captured everyone's attention, and now they needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with. "These scans are fascinating," Dr. Smith said, pointing to the biological data displayed on the large screen. "Their bone density is incredible. It's like their entire skeletal structure evolved to support their massive size under the higher gravity." Dr. Black nodded, adding his own observations. "Look at their city design. Everything is built to support their weight. The streets are made of some material I'd never seen before. It must be incredibly strong to handle their vehicles and foot traffic. Captain Reed watched the recordings of the giants going about their daily lives. A group of them sat at what looked like an outdoor cafe, drinking from cups that could have served as small bathtubs for his species. Two giant children played in a park, easily jumping heights that would have been impossible for normal humans under such high gravity. "Play that sequence again," Reed ordered, pointing to footage of a giant human construction crew. The workers moved with surprising grace despite their size, lifting huge steel beams and operating massive machinery with precise control. Green worked his controls, bringing up more data. "Sir, I've analyzed their communications. They're speaking English, but their voices are much deeper due to their size. And there's something else. They seem to be using some kind of worldwide network, much more advanced than what we've seen on Earth." On the screen, they watched a giant human woman walk out of a tall building. She wore what looked like a business suit, but it would have been large enough to serve as a tent for Reed's entire bridge crew. She held something in her hand that seemed to be a personal computing device, though it was the size of a dining table by the alien standards. "Their technology is remarkable," Dr. Smith commented, studying the readings. "They've had to adapt everything to work at their scale. Even their touchscreens must be incredibly advanced to handle the pressure of their fingers." Dr. Black had been quiet for a while, lost in thought. "Captain," he finally spoke, "I think I understand how this happened. These must be descendants of early Earth colonists. The high gravity and oxygen-rich atmosphere of this planet caused them to adapt over generations." "But how did we not know about them?" Green asked, voicing the question everyone had been thinking. "Look at this." Dr. Black pointed to some historical data they'd managed to collect. There are records of early Earth colonies losing contact with their homeworld during what they call the Great Silence, a period about 300 years ago, when many colony ships went missing. The crew watched more footage of the giants. A medical team rushed a patient into what appeared to be a hospital. The injured person was carried on a stretcher that looked like it could have been a landing pad for their scout ship. The medical workers moved with practiced efficiency, their giant forms somehow gentle despite their size. "They'd built an entire civilization here," Reed said quietly. "Not just surviving, but thriving. Their bodies adapted to become giants, and they adapted their technology and architecture to match." "Sir," Green interrupted, "I'm picking up more detailed scans of their biological structure. Their muscle density, their enhanced lung capacity, their reinforced joints. Everything about them has evolved to work perfectly in this high-gravity environment. They're not just big humans. They're a new subspecies entirely." Reed looked at his crew, seeing the mix of awe and nervousness on their faces. These giants weren't just a curiosity. They represented something unprecedented in known space. A human colony that had not only survived on a high-gravity world, but had evolved to master it completely. "Prepare a full report for the Federation," Reed ordered. "They need to know everything. And—" he paused, looking at the images of the giant humans once more. "They need to understand that we're not dealing with just another lost colony. We're dealing with something entirely new. Humans who have become more than anyone thought possible." The Federation Council's meeting hall buzzed with excited whispers as Captain Reed and his crew presented their findings. The giant screen behind them showed images of the giant humans, making the already small alien council members feel even tinier. "This recording was taken just 3 days ago," Reed explained, pointing to a video of a giant human family having dinner in what looked like a restaurant. The plates on their table were the size of small swimming pools, and their chairs could have housed entire alien families. Dr. Black stepped forward, his research tablet clutched in his hands. "We've managed to intercept some of their entertainment broadcasts. These giants have developed a rich culture, different from Earth humans, but still recognizably human in many ways." The video changed to show a giant human sports event. The players, each 12 feet tall, ran across a field that could have landed several alien spaceships. They played something similar to football, but the sheer scale made it look like giants playing with a house-sized ball. "How do they see us?" one council member asked nervously. "Do they know about other species?" "That's the interesting part," Dr. Smith replied, changing the display to show more data. "They have advanced space detection systems, but they've been focused on looking for things their own size. Our ships are so small compared to what they're expecting. They probably mistake us for space debris." The council watched in amazement as more scenes from giant human life played across the screen. A classroom full of giant children, each one bigger than 3 adult aliens standing on each other's shoulders. A hospital where medical equipment had been scaled up to enormous sizes. A transport station with vehicles that looked like moving buildings. "Their technology is fascinating," Dr. Smith continued. "They've had to solve unique engineering problems we've never even considered. Their computers need to be incredibly sturdy to handle their strength. Their buildings need to support massive weight, and their medical equipment has to work with their enhanced biology." Another council member raised a hand. "But how did they get so big? Humans on Earth aren't like this." Dr. Black stepped forward again. "We found their historical records. When the colony ships first arrived here 300 years ago, the high gravity was a huge problem. Many of the first colonists suffered health issues, but they had advanced genetic engineering technology. Instead of trying to change the planet, they decided to change themselves." The screen showed diagrams of human DNA, with highlighted sections showing the changes. Over generations, they carefully modified their genes to adapt to the high gravity. Each generation grew slightly larger and stronger. Their bones became denser, their muscles more efficient, their hearts more powerful. "But it wasn't just planned changes," Dr. Smith added. "The environment itself shaped them. The high oxygen levels and gravity naturally selected for larger, stronger individuals. What we see now is the result of both deliberate engineering and natural evolution." Captain Reed took control of the presentation again. "They've built their entire society around their size. Their cities are engineering marvels designed to support beings of their mass. Their farms use massive machinery to feed their population. Even their entertainment and sports have evolved to take advantage of their enhanced strength and size." The council chamber fell silent as they watched more footage of the giants going about their daily lives. A giant construction worker lifted a beam that would have needed a crane on most worlds. A giant child gently pet what looked like a horse, but one bred to match their size. It was as big as a small building. "We need to make contact," Reed finally said, breaking the silence. "They're not just big humans. They're a new branch of humanity that's adapted to survive in conditions we thought were impossible. They have technology we've never imagined, solutions to problems we've never faced, and a perspective on the galaxy that could change everything we think we know." The council looked at each other nervously. Making contact with a newly discovered species was one thing, but these giants were something else entirely. They weren't just dealing with big humans. They were dealing with humans who had reshaped themselves to conquer a world that should have been uninhabitable. After weeks of careful planning, the day of first contact finally arrived. The alien delegation stood in the specially prepared meeting chamber, their hearts beating fast with excitement and nervousness. The room had been designed with both species in mind. One half scale for the 4-foot-tall aliens, the other for the 12-foot-tall humans. Captain Reed adjusted his formal uniform one last time. "Remember," he told his team, "they've been just as eager to meet us as we are to meet them." Their response to our communication was very positive. Dr. Smith checked her universal translator again. "The language won't be a problem. They still speak English. It's just the deep pitch of their voices we'll need to get used to." A low rumble shook the floor. The giants were approaching. The massive doors on the other side of the chamber slid open, and the alien delegation got their first close-up look at the giant humans. Governor White led his team into the room, ducking slightly to enter despite the high ceiling. He wore what appeared to be a formal dark suit, but one that could have served as a tent for the entire alien delegation. "Welcome to New Terra," Governor White said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle despite its volume. "We've waited a long time to make contact with other species." He carefully lowered himself to one knee to be closer to eye level with the aliens, a gesture that immediately put the smaller beings more at ease. Captain Reed stepped forward. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Governor. We represent the Galactic Federation, and we're honored to be the first to make contact with your people." The governor smiled, and even that simple gesture was impressive on his massive face. "We've had our orbital telescopes pointed at the stars for generations, hoping to find others out there. We just never thought to look for someone so." He paused diplomatically. "Compact." The other giant humans with him, scientists, diplomats, and security personnel, arranged themselves carefully around the room. They all moved with surprising grace despite their size, clearly used to handling delicate situations. "We have so many questions," Dr. Black said, unable to contain his scientific curiosity. "Your adaptation to this high-gravity world is remarkable." A giant human scientist named Dr. Gray stepped forward, carefully seating herself in one of the massive chairs. "And we have questions too. We've been isolated here for so long. We'd love to hear about Earth, about how humanity has developed on other worlds." The meeting continued, with both sides sharing information. The aliens learned about how the giants had adapted their technology to their size. Everything from their computer interfaces to their medical equipment had to be completely redesigned to work with their larger scale. "One of our biggest challenges," Governor White explained, "was developing materials strong enough to support our weight but light enough to use in everyday items." He demonstrated by pulling out what looked like a chair from his pocket. It unfolded into a seat strong enough to hold his massive frame, but folded down to a surprisingly compact size. The aliens shared their own technological achievements, and the giants showed great interest in their compact designs. "We've always had to think big," Dr. Gray said with a laugh that shook some dust from the ceiling. "It would be fascinating to learn how to make things smaller." As the meeting went on, both sides grew more comfortable with each other. The initial shock of the size difference began to fade as they focused on their similarities rather than their differences. "This is just the beginning," Governor White said near the end of the meeting. "We have so much to learn from each other. Our size gives us a unique perspective on engineering and construction, while your compact technology could revolutionize our space program." Captain Reed looked up at the towering figures of their new allies. Despite their intimidating size, these giants had shown themselves to be gentle, intelligent, and eager to join the galactic community. The universe had just become a much bigger place, in more ways than one. 1 month after the first contact, the knowledge exchange between the giants and the aliens was in full swing. The Seeker's crew had been invited to visit the giants' main research center, a massive building that looked like a small city to the alien visitors. Dr. Gray, the giant scientist, led the alien team through the facility's halls. The aliens rode on a hover platform at shoulder height to their giant hosts, making conversation easier. "Today, we'll show you how we adapted to survive on this world," she said, her deep voice filled with pride. They entered a huge laboratory where giant screens showed DNA structures and body scans. "This is where it all began," Dr. Gray explained. "Our ancestors realized they couldn't survive here long-term without changing themselves." Dr. Smith stared at the displays with amazement. "The changes in your genetic structure are incredible. How did you manage it?" "One small step at a time," Dr. Gray answered, touching a control panel that looked like a billboard to the aliens. "Each generation, we made tiny changes. Stronger bones here, better muscles there, more efficient lungs." She pointed to different parts of the DNA model. "It took 50 years before we started getting taller." The next room held preserved specimens, showing how the colonists had changed over time. The first generation looked like normal humans. Each generation after that was slightly larger, stronger, and better adapted to the high gravity. The hardest part wasn't growing bigger, another giant scientist named Dr. West added. "It was keeping our brains working properly as they grew. We had to redesign our entire nervous system to handle the increased distances. Captain Reed watched as the giants demonstrated their medical equipment. Everything was massive but incredibly precise. "Your technology is amazing," he said. "You've solved problems we never even thought about." Dr. Gray smiled. "We had to. When you're this big, even simple things become engineering challenges. Here, let me show you something interesting." She led them to a testing area where a young giant man was exercising. The giants had developed special machines to help them stay fit in the high gravity. The young man lifted weights that could have anchored a small spaceship, his enhanced muscles handling the load easily. "Our bodies are different now," Dr. Gray explained. "Our hearts are more efficient, our bones nearly unbreakable, our muscles dense enough to handle the gravity. But we have to work hard to maintain this strength." The tour continued to a genetics lab where giant scientists were working on new improvements. "We're still evolving," Dr. West said. "Each generation is a little better adapted than the last. Some of our children are now reaching 13 feet in height." Dr. Black, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke up. "What about your mental capabilities? Has the adaptation affected your minds?" "Actually, yes," Dr. Gray replied, "but in a good way. Our larger brains needed more connections to work properly. We think it made us better at solving physical and spatial problems. That's why our engineering solutions are often so different from what you might expect." The last stop was a museum showing the history of their colony. The aliens saw pictures of the first landing, the early struggles with gravity, and the gradual transformation of the population. There were also displays of their technological evolution, tools and machines that grew larger and more sophisticated as their users grew bigger. "We've come a long way," Dr. Gray said, looking at a picture of the first colonists. "From regular humans struggling to stand, to giants who can build skyscrapers with our bare hands. But we never forgot where we came from." Captain Reed looked up at their giant hosts with new understanding. These weren't just bigger humans. They were pioneers who had reshaped themselves to survive in an impossible environment. They had turned what should have been a deadly weakness into their greatest strength. "You've done more than adapt," he said. "You've shown us that humanity is capable of far more than anyone imagined." The final meeting between the Federation Council and the giant human representatives took place in a specially built dome that connected to both their normal-sized and giant-sized ships. Governor White sat carefully in his massive chair while Captain Reed delivered his final report. "After 3 months of contact," Reed said, addressing both the normal-sized council members and the giant humans, "we've learned more than we ever expected. The giant humans of New Terra have proven to be not just peaceful, but incredibly advanced." The council members nodded, looking up at their new giant allies with a mixture of respect and amazement. The fear they had felt at first was completely gone now. "We would like to formally join the Galactic Federation," Governor White announced, his deep voice gentle despite its power. "But we have one condition. We want to help find other lost human colonies. There might be more out there, adapted to their own worlds in different ways." Dr. Black stepped forward with his research findings. "We've already identified 3 other possible lost colony worlds. The giant space detection technology, combined with our small-scale ships, could revolutionize how we explore the galaxy." On the giant screens behind them, images showed the amazing achievements of the past 3 months. Giant engineers had helped design new space stations that could accommodate beings of any size. The aliens' miniaturization technology had helped the giants create more efficient tools and machines. "Our differences have become our greatest strength," Dr. Gray said, showing a hologram of a new ship design. "We can build massive engines and structures, while our alien friends can handle the delicate control systems. Together, we can build ships bigger and better than anything seen before." The council watched in awe as the hologram showed their joint project, a massive exploration vessel with sections built to scale for both giant and normal-sized crews. It would be the first of its kind in the galaxy. "But more important than the technology," Captain Reed added, "is what we've learned about adaptation and survival. The giants have shown us that intelligent life can thrive in conditions we thought impossible. Governor White nodded, gesturing to his fellow giants. We've learned just as much from you. Your Federation shows us that size doesn't matter when it comes to intelligence and innovation. Small or large, we're all seeking the same things: knowledge, friendship, and a peaceful galaxy. Dr. Smith, who had spent months studying the giants' biology, presented her final report. The giants' adaptation to their high-gravity world proves that humanity is more flexible than we ever imagined. Their enhanced strength, reinforced bones, and improved organs could help us understand how to survive on many different worlds. The council members discussed among themselves briefly before making their decision. The head of the council, a small alien named Leader Blue, stood up. "We officially welcome the giants of Nuterra into the Galactic Federation," he announced. "Your unique perspective and capabilities will make our community stronger. Together, we will explore the galaxy and perhaps find more lost colonies, more variations of humanity, and more wonders we never expected." The giants and aliens applauded together, the sound a strange mix of thunderous claps and lighter ones. Captain Reed looked around the room, remembering how scared they had been when they first discovered the giants. Now, these 12-foot-tall humans were their trusted allies and friends. "This is just the beginning," Governor White said, carefully shaking hands with Leader Blue. "There are so many worlds to explore, so many possibilities to discover. And together, giant and small, we'll find them all." As the ceremony ended, Captain Reed made one final note in his log. "Today marks a new chapter in galactic history. We came looking for signs of life, and found something more. Proof that humanity's greatest strength isn't our size or our technology, but our ability to adapt and grow. The galaxy just got a lot bigger and a lot more interesting."